Well, hiya, BookTube. Bill Ruttenberg here with the Ruttenberg Library. I hope everyone out in BookTube land is doing very, very well. I've come to you today. It's Tag Tuesday, so I wanted to do a tag. I haven't done one in a while, and I've got a whole bunch of them laying around. I just never seem to get them recorded. But this one, I put it to the front of the list. I just saw it last week, and so I put it to the front of the list because it is a part of a wonderful reading initiative that has been put out by Vin at Revenant Reads, and this is HIstorathon 2023. And this is a reading initiative or reading event that is basically we are reading nonfiction history for the entire year as part of our reading. And this is basically just a way to try to give nonfiction history a little bit of love, because sometimes it gets put on the back burner by people, put by the wayside. And some people, if one of the things you tend to hear kids say is it's boring. Well, I am here to tell you history is not boring. If anything, it is more exciting than fiction is, because it actually happened. So anyway, in our reading initiative, Vin made a plan of splitting the year into quarters, so into 4 parts. And in the first 3 months, we are reading prehistory to 500 AD. And so all of our reading in these first 3 months is focused on that time period. So that's where we're at right now. And I think there is a plan to make book tags for each of these 4 quarters. And so this one I'm going to do today is based on that first quarter. But real fast, second quarter from April to June is 500 to 1500. And then the third quarter will be 1500 to 1820. And then the fourth quarter, which is October through December, will be 1820 to the present. And so we're really hoping to gather in as many people as possible to join us in this reading initiative, because we just feel that you can't read enough history. History is great, and it doesn't get the love it deserves. So anyway, this tag that I'm going to do, this is called the HIstorathon book tag, Ancient Cultures. Now, this was put together by one of my fellow people involved in the event, Jack at the Rambling Racketer. And he created this tag, and he tagged me in it. And so, yeah, that's why I'm doing it. Well, not to mention history's awesome, so I want to promote it as much as possible. Anyway, his first question that he came up with, so all these prompts are based around ancient cultures. Now, I will put out there real fast that those that follow the channel, that know me, and those people in the Voxer group and in the Discord thing that we got going on, know that this is, prehistory to 500 is not my typical read. I read a lot of history, but just not from that time period. So I am learning tons in that Voxer group and in that Discord group. If you want to join, let me know. We'll get you hooked up and get you in the discussion. I'm learning tons, but I haven't added a lot because I just don't know a lot. And so when I do this tag and I go through these questions, my answers will not be based on books from that time period. I do apologize, but I literally don't have any to recommend because I haven't read any. This is not my area of expertise. So the first prompt or question is the Romans. What books, writers, genres are your bread and circus? So for me, like I said, I am not prehistory to 500. I'm enjoying what I'm reading, but it's not my cup of tea. It's not my bread and butter, or my bread and circus, as he put. So for me, my key areas of emphasis are the American Civil War. I love learning about the antebellum period in the United States, and then Abraham Lincoln. So that whole latter half, the 1840s, all the way through the 1860s. Absolutely love that time period to learn about. Yeah, and so if I had that would be my favorite genre. And then my favorite authors would be probably James McPherson is still one of my favorites. You guys hear me talk about him over and over on the channel. Bruce Catton is one of my favorites to read. Harold Holzer, if you're looking for some good Lincoln biographies. Harold Holzer has a ton of them. He is an excellent writer, and he not only writes for adults, obviously, but he also has some kid books that really aim things at young adults anyway, and I would highly recommend those. Eric Foner, who is a historian of slavery and then Reconstruction, and then some Civil War stuff along with that. Really enjoy his work. And then another Civil War / Abraham Lincoln historian is Alan Gelzo. Really enjoy his work. So question number 2, the Sumerians. What is a work you read many years ago but still appreciate? Again, I'm going to bring up, at least one of them that I talk about over and over and over again on the channel, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record. I just literally like it that much, and that is Battle Cry for Freedom by James McPherson. I think it has stood the test of time. It was put in, was it 1988, I think is when it was published, and to me, to this day, it is still the #1 most comprehensive one-volume history of the American Civil War. And it doesn't just do the Civil War, it also covers the antebellum period and Reconstruction. And so it is just all-inclusive there. And I think McPherson did a heck of a job. He won the Pulitzer for the book, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. Anybody that asks me on my channel, like when they put in the comments, what's a good Civil War book? That is one of the first that I point to, because it is something that a novice can pick up and read. It's a big, thick thing, but it reads really fast, and he puts things into, his narrative flows very, very well. It's not like a scholarly, thump you on the head type of book. Although it is scholarly, it is written where the layman can understand it. And for that, I absolutely love it. And that, and again, it gives, number 2, it is a little bit scholarly, but it's understandable, and it gives a ton of detail on stuff. I use it a lot in my segments of it in my classroom with my 8th graders. And then the other one that I would like to mention that has stood the test of time, and this is a fairly old book. I can't even remember when it was published, maybe in the 40s, 1940s, maybe. I might be off, but it's somewhere around in there. And that is Abraham Lincoln, The Prairie Years, and then the War Years. And this was put out by Carl Sandburg, and he was definitely a biased pro-Lincoln writer. I admit that right off the get-go, but I love it for what it is. It's very thorough. It's one of the first full-scale biographies that I read on Lincoln before I really started collecting and reading. He was one of the first, and he made me fall in love with Lincoln. He tells a good story. And the volume that I have is actually 2 volumes. I think it was it Time Life Books maybe put it out. And it's a big, like, coffee table size book. And they're probably like this, but like double column print. And again, it's in 2 volumes. And I sat down, I was like, am I ever going to get through this when I first started it? But then next thing you know, I'm done with it. And anyway, absolutely love the book, and highly recommend it. There's several, it's easy to find, several different editions out there, various forms. Sometimes they print it in 4 books. Sometimes they're in little pocket books. I mean, there's all kinds of versions of it. And they've got abridged versions out there too. So highly recommend that if you want to read a pro-Lincoln book. Now, number 3, the Shang. What is your favorite non-example to pillory? I got to be honest, I had to look up the word pillory. Sorry, Jack. My vocabulary is not that big. But my definition I found, to attack or ridicule publicly. So I am taking it that this question means, what is your least favorite book on your subject? The one that you just can't stand even though it's in your wheelhouse. And hopefully I'm interpreting that right. And if I'm not, just laugh at me and move on. So I chose, and you guys have heard me talk about this book before on my channel. I hate this book. I dislike this author's writing and his beliefs. I am so not in tune with him. It was The Real Lincoln, A New Look at Abraham Lincoln, His Agenda in an Unnecessary War by Thomas DiLorenzo. And Thomas DiLorenzo's written a handful of books, 3 or 4, maybe 5 books on Lincoln, and they're all anti-Lincoln books. I can't stand. I read this one. I actually want to pick up the other ones just to see what they're like, but I couldn't stand this one because, well, first of all, I did not at all agree with his point of view and the angle he was taking. Again, keep in mind I'm a huge Lincoln fan, and so automatically I was reading it more to get the other side of the story because, you know, being pro-Lincoln, it's easy to find pro-Lincoln books, but I wanted to be, you know, well balanced as a reader, and so I went looking for an anti-Lincoln book on purpose, and this was the one I chose. And I felt that, well, first of all, I disagreed with several of the points he makes in the book. Second of all, I think he takes a ton of stuff out of context and makes you look at something this way when the evidence he's producing was something from this way. And it really bothered me. And I was well read enough in this area to recognize it. And then he had problems in his notes and his sources, what was what was it? Was he sourcing? Something was off on his sources and stuff. I think I actually talked about this in an earlier video. Go find that, and I'll give a fuller explanation of that. So anyway, let's just move on. Number 4. So number 4 question, early Basketmaker. Name an early work that points the way to later monuments. Now again, I'm sticking with Civil War and Lincoln because that's kind of my wheelhouse. I know it's not ancient cultures, but I chose some older works on Lincoln that paved the way for all of the scholars that followed. One of those is William Herndon, his Lincoln biographies that he came out with. I know there was one, and then there's I actually don't know how many exactly he came out with. I probably ought to do a little more research on that, but I know he had one, and then he co-wrote one, and I can't remember if there's a third one or not. Anyway, William Herndon, if you don't know who he was his law partner right before he became president. And so he knew Lincoln fairly well. And right after Lincoln died, he saw some possibilities of dollar signs in putting together, he tried to put together one of the first biographies, full biographies on Lincoln. And he wanted the true story. And so he went around and interviewed everybody in the area, anybody and everybody that ever had contact with Lincoln. And he used all of those primary sources to put together his work on Lincoln. And doesn't matter if you agree or disagree with him, all of these scholars that have followed have piggybacked on the work that he did. And it was an important work. Again, whether you agree or disagree with what he said in the actual book, his research on it was pivotal to the scholarship of Lincoln, because he did all of these, like I said, all these interviews that might not have been done. He did it before people ended up dying. And so a lot of interviews weren't, with people. If you're trying to write a biography on someone after the fact, a lot of the people that were, in the context or around him at that time period might die off and you can't get the interview done. He got the interviews done. And so that work paved the way for all the Lincoln biographers afterwards. And then another one that was just as important was the 10-volume Lincoln biography set by John Nicolay and John Hay, who were his secretaries during his presidency. And of course, they had everyday access with him, and they had lots of intimate conversations. They knew the mind of Lincoln very well. And they took all of the official documents that came across their desk, which was a lot. It was a ton of stuff. They took all the letters, diaries, not liaries, letters, diaries, the official paperwork, all of that kind of stuff that could be scholarly research. They collected it all and put together this 10-volume series, and pretty much all biographies from that point on, and that was the late 1800s. I can't remember the exact publishing date, 1880s, 1890s, somewhere in there, I believe. I could be off on that, but it was late 1800s, I know that. But anyway, everybody that's followed that point has used their research, used their, oftentimes quoted from their 10-volume series. So they were instrumental to putting together all the monuments that you see. I've got tons of them up here. All the monuments that you see put together on Lincoln. Number 5. The Babylonians. What book did you expect to be impenetrable, but found quite easy to sink into? And I'm going to go back to that John Nicolay and John Hay 10-volume series. Obviously, being 10 volumes, that becomes very intimidating. And, you know, John Hay went on to, when he's Secretary of State later down the line and everything. And sometimes when you read politicians' works, sometimes it is not the most fascinating reading. Let's just say that. But I found that because our local library has all 10 of them, and once I dug into them and I started to read them, they read really fast. They're well written. They are not hard to read at all. They are books that are pro-Lincoln, so that probably helps in my reading. But I just enjoyed them. You know, just 10 volumes alone can be intimidating, but once I started, I think I've read the first 3, and I just need to go back. There's nothing intimidating about them now. The other book that I would say from the get-go that was intimidating, and again, just by pure size, was Battle Cry for Freedom. But again, my favorite book on the Civil War now. And a big, thick book. The size of the book is what intimidated me. And once I started reading that, there was no intimidation at all. It was like James McPherson was my best friend, sitting in the back of my car, taking me on the battlefield tour, telling me what's going on. That's what it was like reading his book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Number 6, the Persians. How do you organize your bookshelves? Now, I've answered this in several tags in the past. It's a question that gets put on a lot of different tags. And so I always start with, before my youngest daughter was born, I had our room right up above here. That was kind of my library. And I had bookshelves all along 2 of the walls. And I had everything organized alphabetically by author last name. And everything was super easy to find. And then I had a whole section that I had started that was the books that I had read out of my entire collection, because I got a fairly substantial collection. And I started actually putting those in Dewey Decimal order, because I'm a nerd like that. And I wanted them by topic. And so that's how I used to organize my books. And I loved it. I would love to go back to that. But again, my daughter was born, and so my oldest daughter moved from that room to that room, and my new baby girl was across the hall from our bedroom. And so this room was taken up, and since my oldest daughter ended up moving out, you know, after graduating and everything, my wife has told me that's not turning back into a library. So be that as it may. Now, how do I organize my books? So you'll notice all these books are pretty much by size. Everything is the same size. And I do that for space, because I try to get the shelves as close together as possible so that I'm not wasting space. So I tried to use books that are all the same size. And then down here, I also have most of these books I haven't read. I want a library down here that I have some choice in. A lot of my stuff, most of my stuff that I've read is actually upstairs. We have a smaller bedroom. It's more of an oversized closet. And I keep all my bookshelves that used to be in that room in that other room. And so, again, they're by size now, just to maximize my space. So, number 7. Ishango, bone of the Stone Age, Central Africa. How does the length of a work affect your reading experience? Okay, so for me, when I'm reading a large book, a 700 to 1,000 page book, I tend to read it slow. Doesn't matter if it's a fast-paced book or not. Doesn't matter. For whatever reason, in my head, I get bogged down just by the pure size, and I tend to spend a lot of time, even if it's a good fast-paced book, I spend a lot of time, 3 months sometimes, 4 months sometimes, in the book, because I'll just read a little segment and then I'll go to another work. I'll have a whole bunch of smaller works on the side, so that, and it's more just up here, it's a mental thing, to make me feel like I'm getting through my books. Because if I stay in one book for a solid month and I only read one book in the month, mentally that bothers me. I don't know why it shouldn't bother me, but it does. So I read a little bit in this one, and then I have several other smaller volumes. Plus, as you guys know, if you follow the channel, I'm a mood reader. And so I read whatever I'm in the mood to read. If I don't feel like reading Cleopatra, I put it down and I pick up Centennial and I read some fiction. If I don't feel like reading a big, thick book like Centennial, I pick up, whatever else is sitting there on the table there beside me. So that is how it really affects me as a reader. So let's see here. Number 8, the Huns. How do you read or pack books while traveling? So anytime I go on, and I'm taking it like vacation is how I'm going to interpret this. He might have meant from work to and from work too, but I am taking it like going on vacation. I always take my school backpack, with the things that go across your shoulders. And in the particular bag I have, it has lots of compartments in it, as most backpacks do nowadays for kids. It isn't just one big zip up. It's got several different ones. So what I do is, in the big zip up one, I keep my notebooks and my probably 3 or 4 copies of different books I want to read while we're on vacation for that week or week and a half, whatever it is. And then inside that big pocket, there is on the back, it has a little, I don't know how to describe it. It's a thin little pocket. And I slide magazines down into that, my history magazines that I want to read. And alongside my books, I can't remember if I just said it, I have notebooks to take notes, and I keep those in there. And then as I'm on vacation, if we stop anywhere and I pick up any literature, like travel brochures and that kind of stuff, I'll throw those in there as well. So I zip back up the big pockets, and now we get into the front pockets. And when I travel, if we're in the car, I usually take it's got little netted side pockets on it where I put my drinks, my bottle of pop or whatever. And then the zip up part has a compartment for snacks. And then if you unzip the next part, it has a spot for all my pencils and pens and erasers. It's a wonderful backpack to use at school as a teacher, as a traveler, whatever. So that is how I travel with my books. And by the way, my 3, 4, 5 copies of books, whatever I take with me, they are usually of different sizes. So I'll have a big one, small, medium, large. And then I have different genres. And I have nonfiction and fiction, so that no matter what mood I'm in, I can find a book to read, and so that I'm not, wasting any reading time. Question number 9. And I am going to butcher the name of this. It is the Aurignacian Culture. What are your favorite pop culture references to ancient cultures? Now, I'm scratching my head on this, trying to think of some right off the top of my head, and I'm sure that I use them, but I could not think of a bunch of them. The biggest one that I use, and this is more mythology, but the biggest one I use, and I use it all the time at school, anytime I want the kids to lift something, come on, Hercules. I say that all the time, or when we're at football practice, come on, hit that guy, Hercules. I say stuff like that all the time. But when I was looking at that'd be probably my biggest reference, like personally, that I would verbally say. But I saw some others as I was looking around, other pop culture references. My Nike shoes. In class, I'll talk about, 2 kids, one trying to get the other one in trouble, and I'll tell the other one, don't let that siren drag you into their business. That's a reference I use. The movie Gladiator, what an awesome movie. That obviously the whole movie is referencing gladiatorial times. And then I was thinking of my youngest daughter. We just watched a Barbie movie last night when we got home from school, and it had Pegasus in it. And of course that goes back to the mythology thing. And then she has some cartoon that she watches that has a character called Calypso. And so, again, another reference. So that brings us to the end of this BookTube. Video's dragged on a little bit, so we'll wrap things up right now. Question number 10, last one. The Minoans established trade routes and tag some fellow booktubers. So I'm going to tag 3 booktubers. I don't know if they've been tagged yet or not. I did not pay attention to who everybody's been tagging, because this tag has been starting to make the rounds on BookTube. I am going to tag my good friend Brian over at Brian MR. I'm going to tag my friends Arion and Prometheus over at Book Zealots. and I'm going to tag Steve Donahue. I'm not sure if anybody tagged Steve or not, so I'm going to tag Steve Donahue. So until next time, BookTube, I thank you for watching. Thank you for new subscribers. I hope you are having a good day. And until next time, happy reading.